I gave my credit card to 3 women, but my maid's choice changed my life. Welcome to Next Chapter Life Stories. Please subscribe and give us a like. It really means a lot to us. Share this video with your friends and loved ones, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you won't miss our next stories. Now, sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's story. My name's Daniel Cole. I'm 41, a self-made billionaire from Austin, Texas. Sounds impressive, right? But if there's one thing money can't buy, it's loyalty. I learned that the hard way. See, when you've got money, real money, everyone wants something. Your time, your connections, your attention, or your credit card. And somewhere between boardrooms and luxury parties, I realized I didn't even know who I could trust anymore. I wasn't always this way. I grew up in a trailer park on the outskirts of Dallas. My mom used to clean houses for a living. She'd tell me, "Danny, kindness doesn't cost a thing. But remember, it's also the easiest thing people fake." I didn't really get what she meant until I made my first 100 million. So, yeah, call it paranoia. Or maybe curiosity. But a few months ago, I decided to test something. Or rather, someone. Actually, make that 3 someones. There were 3 women in my life at that point. All different, all beautiful, and all playing very different roles. The first was Vanessa, a high-profile model. Gorgeous, confident, every inch of her Instagram perfect. We'd been dating for 6 months, and let's just say, she loved the spotlight as much as she loved champagne. She'd fly out with me to Monaco, LA, New York. But somehow, she never reached for her wallet. The second was Clara, my ex-fiancée. We'd broken up a year earlier, mostly because she said I was emotionally unavailable. Translation: I didn't spend enough time telling her how amazing she was while funding her wellness brand that never launched. Still, she stayed close. Too close. And I always wondered if she wanted me back, or just missed the lifestyle. And then there was Mira, my housekeeper. 26 years old, quiet, polite, always humming while she worked. She never asked questions, never lingered, never gossiped. Just did her job, perfectly. I didn't think much of her at first, until one day I saw her stop outside the front gate to hand her lunch to a homeless man who sat by the curb every morning. She thought I didn't notice. But I did. That was the day the idea hit me. What if I gave each of these women my credit card, no limits, and watched what they did with it? It sounds crazy, I know. But I wanted to see what they valued when no one was watching. So I did it. I told each woman that I was going away on business for a week, and that I wanted to give them something to treat themselves. 1 card. No spending limit. No instructions. Just, show me who you are. Vanessa was the first. She laughed and said, "Baby, you know I'm gonna need more than a week." Within 24 hours, she'd booked a private shopping spree on Rodeo Drive, a spa retreat in Malibu, and a yacht dinner with her influencer friends. I didn't have to guess. She tagged me in every photo. #MyBillionaireBay. Subtle, right? Clara was next. She was different. Calculated. She thanked me politely and said she'd use it responsibly. Then my assistant sent me a spending report. Private jet to Aspen. 5-star resort. Room for 2. Guess who the second guest was? Her business partner. The one she swore was just a friend. And then there was Mira. When I handed her the card, she froze like I'd just handed her a golden ticket to another world. "Mr. Cole, I can't take this," she said softly. I smiled. "It's not a trick, Mira. Buy something for yourself. You deserve it." She hesitated, eyes darting between me and the card. "I'll take care of it, sir," she finally said. That night, I sat in my study, looking out over the city skyline. You'd think when you've made it that far in life, you'd feel untouchable. But I didn't. I felt hollow. Like all the money in the world couldn't fill the silence in that giant house. A week later, I returned. Vanessa was waiting in the driveway, wearing a new diamond necklace the size of a small planet. She kissed me on the cheek, smelling like expensive perfume and expectation. "Babe," she said, I got us matching watches. You know, his and hers. I asked, "That's what you spent it on?" She grinned. "Of course. You said treat myself, and us." I nodded, thanked her, and walked inside. Clara showed up that evening. She looked nervous, overly rehearsed. "Daniel," she started, "I know it looks bad, but the trip was for work. You have to believe me." I didn't say much, just asked her one question. "Did he sleep in the same room as you?" Her silence told me everything. But Mira didn't come by. Not that day. Not the next. 3 days later, I finally asked one of the groundskeepers if he'd seen her. "Yeah," he said. "She was at the store buying a bunch of groceries and blankets a few nights ago. Said it was for some folks downtown." I didn't know what to think. Was she just being kind? Or was that her version of luxury? So, I drove out to her neighborhood, a small, quiet part of East Austin. Not dangerous, but humble. When I pulled up outside her little apartment building, I saw her through the window. She was kneeling by a kid's desk, helping him with homework. There were boxes of groceries stacked by the door and a vase of fresh daisies on the table. I just stood there for a minute, watching. That's when something in me shifted. Maybe this wasn't a test for them. Maybe it was a test for me. Because for the first time in years, I didn't feel like Daniel Cole, billionaire. I felt like Danny, the kid whose mom said kindness didn't need a reason. I didn't expect my little experiment to explode the way it did. When I gave each woman my black card, it wasn't about money, it was about truth. But truth, as I was about to learn, doesn't reveal itself quietly. Vanessa was the first to fail the test. I found out the same evening, scrolling through transaction alerts on my phone. 5 designer stores in less than 3 hours. Jewelry, handbags, a spa treatment that cost more than some people make in a month. At first, I told myself it didn't mean anything. Maybe she was buying gifts. Maybe she misunderstood. But deep down, I knew Vanessa always wanted more. More attention. More luxury. More proof that she was above everyone else. So I invited her to dinner at my penthouse, just the 2 of us. She arrived wearing a dress that probably came from one of those stores, shimmering like she was walking onto a red carpet. Her perfume hit the air before she even spoke. "Daniel," she smiled, sliding her arms around me, "you have no idea how happy I am lately. I finally feel like I can live the life I deserve." I looked her in the eyes. "You mean the life my card can buy?" Her smile froze, just for a heartbeat. "What's that supposed to mean?" I placed my phone on the table, screen up, a list of charges staring back at her. "Tell me, Vanessa, how much of this life would you have if I took all this away tomorrow?" She laughed, nervously. "Oh, come on, Daniel, it's not what you think." I leaned back. "Then what is it? Because to me, it looks like you saw my money as an open buffet." Her tone hardened. "You said it was a test. You told me to live freely. Maybe you didn't mean it, but I did exactly that." I paused, stunned by her arrogance. "So spending thousands in a day was freedom?" "No," she said, eyes flashing. "It was honesty. I didn't pretend to be something I'm not. You wanted to see who I was. Well, here I am." And just like that, she stood up, grabbed her clutch, and left. No tears. No shame. Just the sound of her heels fading down the marble hallway. I sat there in silence for a long time, the city lights flickering beyond the glass. For a man who'd built empires, it's strange how powerless you feel when you realize someone only loved your reflection, not you. Clara was different. Or at least I thought she was. She was calm, deliberate. Always spoke softly, always smiled just enough. When I checked her transactions, they were strange. Donations to animal shelters. A purchase at a bookstore. Some flowers. I almost felt proud, until I noticed one transfer to a private account. Not hers. Her ex's. It was only $2,000, but it hit harder than any betrayal could. I called her the next morning. "Can we talk?" She came to my office, a quiet confidence in her step, dressed in her usual soft beige. I didn't waste time. Why did you send money to your ex, Clara? She blinked. You checked my statements? I had to. It's part of the test. She sighed, like a teacher tired of explaining something obvious. He lost his job. He's struggling. I couldn't just watch him fall apart. I clenched my fists under the table. You used my money for your ex-boyfriend? It's just money, Daniel, she said softly. And it helped someone who needed it more than you do. Her calmness infuriated me. You talk about compassion like it's currency. But it's not compassion when it's not yours to give. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw steel beneath her softness. Maybe that's why you'll always be lonely. Because to you, love has to pass an audit first. I didn't respond. Couldn't. She stood, collected her purse, and whispered, You test everyone, Daniel. Maybe you're the one who keeps failing. That one stayed with me. Even after she left, the echo of her words lingered like a crack in glass. And then there was Mira. She didn't call, didn't text. For 3 days, her card showed no activity. No restaurants, no stores, no bills. Nothing. I thought maybe she'd lost it. Or maybe she was too afraid to use it. So I drove down to the old house where she worked, my grandmother's estate, now quiet and half-forgotten. She was there, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee and a small smile. Daniel, she said, surprised but not startled. Did I do something wrong? I looked at her, confused. You didn't use the card. I did, she said softly. Just not in the way you think. From her apron pocket, she pulled a folded receipt from a grocery store. 1 bag of rice. Some vegetables. Bread. And the rest, she hesitated. I used to fix the roof at Mrs. Alvarez's house. She's been living under leaks for months. I stared at her, speechless. You could have spent thousands, I finally said. Why didn't you? She smiled faintly. Because it wasn't mine. And because it doesn't take much to make a difference. I felt something twist inside me, something sharp, like guilt dressed as admiration. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She didn't even know she was being tested. When I got back to my car, I just sat there for a long time, watching her sweep the porch, hum quietly to herself. There was peace in her simplicity, something I'd never been able to buy. That night, the house felt heavier. I poured myself a drink and stared out at the skyline. 3 women. 3 reflections of my choices. Vanessa showed me greed. Clara showed me reason. Mira showed me grace. And all 3 made me realize how empty my world had become. I'd built towers that reached the clouds, but none that reached people. I'd bought loyalty but never trust. I'd been loved, but never known. Somewhere between success and solitude, I'd forgotten how to feel. The next morning, I gathered all 3 cards and placed them on the desk. For a moment, I wondered if maybe I was the one under scrutiny, not them. Maybe my wealth wasn't a blessing, but a mirror I kept pointing at others to avoid seeing myself. 2 weeks later, I ran into Vanessa again. At a gala, of course. She was laughing too loud, standing too close to another man who looked exactly like I used to. Polished, distracted, already halfway gone. She caught my eye for a second, then turned away as if nothing had ever happened. Clara sent me a letter. No anger, no apology, just a single line. Kindness is not weakness, Daniel. I hope one day you'll understand that. And Mira. She showed up at my office with a small paper bag. I brought you lunch, she said. Homemade stew. You probably skipped breakfast again. I laughed. A real laugh, the kind I hadn't felt in months. Why do you do that? I asked. Why do you care so much? She shrugged. Because you look like someone who forgot what home feels like. That line hit me harder than any boardroom loss ever could. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the towers, I stood by the window again. Same skyline, same glass walls, but somehow everything looked different. Maybe the test wasn't about money. Maybe it was about me learning to see people beyond what they could gain or lose. Maybe wealth isn't what you give, it's what you notice. And for the first time in years, I noticed the world outside my empire. The laughter from the street. The light in the windows of homes I didn't own. And the quiet thought that maybe, just maybe, I still had a chance to be human again. It's strange how quiet the world becomes when you finally stop trying to control it. After the test ended, I didn't tell anyone what really happened. Not Vanessa. Not Clara. Not even Mira. But the truth had already done its work. It had stripped me down to who I really was. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't have a plan. No deals to close. No investors waiting for my call. Just silence. I tried to fill it at first. New projects, charity boards, public events, but everything felt hollow. People still smiled when they saw me, but it was the kind of smile meant for a signature, not a soul. One evening, I drove aimlessly until I found myself outside the old estate again, the place where Mira worked, and where, oddly enough, I'd always felt more grounded than anywhere else. The porch light was on. I could see her silhouette through the window, moving gracefully as she arranged flowers in a vase. I didn't knock right away. I just stood there, watching the glow spill onto the grass, realizing that peace doesn't make noise, it just waits for you to notice it. She opened the door with that same soft smile. "Daniel," she said, surprised. "It's been a while." "Too long," I admitted. Inside, the air smelled like baked bread and clean linen. It felt real. She poured tea without asking, sat across from me, and studied my face quietly. "You look tired," she said. "I am. I've been chasing something I can't seem to catch." She tilted her head. "Maybe it's not meant to be caught." I smiled faintly. "You always say things like that. Simple, but they stick." "That's because truth doesn't need decoration," she said. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clock ticked softly in the corner. And then I told her everything. About the test. The cards. The lessons I didn't expect to learn. How Vanessa made me realize the emptiness of luxury. How Clara showed me that morality isn't always black and white. And how Mira, without even knowing, reminded me what humanity actually looks like. When I finished, I expected her to be angry, to feel used. But she just nodded slowly. "So, you were testing love?" she asked gently. "I thought I was," I said. "But now I think I was testing faith." I wanted to know if anyone could see me beyond the numbers. She looked down at her cup. "And did you find your answer?" "Yes," I said quietly. "But it wasn't what I expected." After that night, I started showing up more often. Not as a billionaire, but as a man trying to relearn how to live. I helped her repaint the kitchen. We repaired an old bench out back. Sometimes we'd sit for hours without talking, just watching the sunset fade into dusk. I didn't realize how starved I was for silence that didn't come from loneliness. Mira never treated me differently. She didn't ask about my companies, my cars, or my status. If anything, she made me work. Literally. "Since you're here," she'd say, handing me a broom, "you might as well earn your tea." I'd laugh, but part of me loved it, being useful for something that didn't have a profit margin. There was one evening I'll never forget. We were cleaning the garden after a storm. The sky was heavy with the smell of rain, the soil dark and rich under our boots. I looked over and saw her brushing mud off her hands, humming a song I didn't recognize. And suddenly, I realized I didn't want to go back to the city. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. "Can I ask you something?" I said. She glanced up. "Of course. If you knew who I really was, everything I own, everything I've done, would you still see me the same way?" She smiled softly. "Daniel, I don't care about what you own. I care about what owns you." That line hit me harder than any loss I'd ever faced. Because for years, I'd been owned by success, chained to it, really, too afraid to let go, too proud to admit it. And here was a woman who had nothing, teaching me what freedom looked like. A few months passed. I sold my penthouse. Moved into a smaller house by the lake. No staff, no marble floors, no noise. Just air that smelled like pine and rain. I kept the businesses running, but I stopped chasing. For the first time, I wasn't building an empire, I was building a life. Mira would visit sometimes, bringing bread or herbs from her garden. Sometimes she'd stay for dinner. We'd talk about everything, and nothing. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace, she said quietly, "You know, you remind me of the boy in the stories my father used to tell. The one who went searching for gold, but came back with light." "Sounds like a poor trade," I joked. "Not really," she said, smiling. "Gold fades. Light stays." Years of boardroom victories couldn't prepare me for the kind of silence that followed her words. It wasn't emptiness, it was peace. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for applause. And that night, I finally understood something I'd been blind to for decades. Wealth isn't measured by what you can spend, it's measured by what you can give without losing yourself. A few weeks later, I returned to the city for a charity gala. They called me up to speak. I'd done it 100 times before, but this one felt different. When I stepped onto the stage, the lights were blinding. Dozens of faces, dressed in luxury, watching me like I was still one of them. I took a deep breath and said, "Success used to mean power to me. Then it meant freedom. But somewhere along the way, I realized it's neither. Success is responsibility, to people, not profit. To remember that every dollar we spend is a vote for the kind of world we want to build." There was a long silence. And then, applause. Real, thunderous applause. But I wasn't moved by it. Because I finally understood it didn't matter. When I walked off that stage, I didn't go to the after-party. I got in my car, drove back to the lake, and found Mira sitting by the water's edge, barefoot, watching the moon ripple across the surface. She looked up and smiled. "How was your big night?" I sat beside her. "Overrated." She laughed, the sound warm and soft, like home. We didn't need to say anything after that. The world had already said too much for both of us. As the wind brushed against the trees, I looked at her and said quietly, "You changed the way I see everything, Mira." She shook her head. "No, Daniel. You just started looking." And for once, I didn't argue. I just let her words sink in, the kind of truth that doesn't fade. It's been years since that test. The empire still stands, but I no longer live at its center. I've learned to delegate, to trust, to let things grow without me hovering over them. Sometimes, Mira and I take long drives through the countryside. No destination. Just miles of open road and quiet understanding. Every so often, people still recognize me, the billionaire who gave away his card. They always ask, "So, which woman passed the test?" And I always smile and say, "The one who never knew there was one." Now, when I walk through the garden by the lake, I catch myself thinking about the man I used to be. A man with everything, yet starved for meaning. A man who believed love had to be earned, trust had to be tested, and peace was a luxury only the poor could afford. Turns out, I was wrong about all of it. Because peace doesn't come from getting more. It comes from needing less. So if you're watching this and wondering what the point of all this was, here it is. Don't wait until you lose everything to see what truly matters. And don't test people to find out who they are. Love them, and let time do the testing for you. Thank you for listening to my story. If it meant something to you, share it. And remember, sometimes the richest thing you can give is a piece of your heart.